Hello, and we are back with a little bit more UV unwrapping. As promised, this video is just going to be about unwrapping this bottom little screen keypad portion of our vending machine. So, to get started, let's go into local view here and tab into edit mode, and we can start placing our seams. So if we unwrap it right now, you can see that obviously there's a lot of issues here. So let's get into it. First thing we can do, if we look at the back side here, is we can just cut off the backside and make that its own UV island. So I'm just going to select those corner seams here, on this side, grab this whole seam right here, and we will mark that. Okay, now if we unwrap, you can see that this is its own thing, and it's laid out straight and square. We apply our test grid here. You can see everything is nice and square. I'll worry about packing and orientation once we have all of our seams set. Okay. Up next, let's look at this little indent here, and we can mark a seam around that. You can see there's an edge loop that flows around the whole thing. Okay. See, it goes the whole thing, so we can mark that seam. And I'll do the same thing over here. Mark that seam. And then let's also, I'm just going to worry about the big objects for now. This front rim here, oops. Okay, so this area here, I'm going to make that, and actually I'll probably even grow that to include this. So this will be its own UV island, is all these faces. Okay, we can't include these interior kind of vertical faces, because if we did, when we unfolded them, these corners would kind of overlap and either cause distortion or just repetition of texture, which we don't want. So I'm going to grab this edge loop that goes around the rim, and we will mark that seam. Okay. So let's just check up on our UVs. You can see right now I have live unwrap enabled, so every time I mark a seam, it re-unwraps. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. We get a little bit of distortion here in the corners if we go into our material preview. And obviously this is not quite right. And down here, on this island, we get a little bit of distortion up in the corners, although it's very minor. So what we could do is we could cut seams here and here. There we go. Now you can see that that straightens itself out nicely. Okay, so I will go around here and do the same thing on all four corners. Right there, we'll mark those seams. Come over here, mark these two seams, and the same thing down here. Mark that one, mark that seam. Okay, select everything. Now you see this is the island that I just marked those seams on. And if I just rotate this 180 degrees, so move it back over here so we can see it. Okay, you can see those are the seams that we just marked in the corners. These faces being the kind of the vertical ones. So that's looking great. I think we're done with that island. Now this outside piece, I'm going to select linked with L, hover over and hit L, and I'm also going to turn on delimit seams. So now I can just select the UV islands here. And you can see that we're getting some curving here, and that's because we need to add some relief cuts to the corners here. So let me see if I can find, there we go. So right here in the corner, I'm going to grab these three edges, and I'm going to mark that seam there. And I'll do the same thing here. Oops. We'll mark that seam there. Now if I select it, okay, so you can see that corner down there. This is the one that we just marked those seams. Now that's laying much flatter and truer. You can look at our test grid as well. See that that is looking better. Now these letters are reversed, and that tells me that we probably have normals reversed. We can look at our Face orientation here, you can see it all turns red. So that means that yes, our normals are in fact reversed. So select everything and hit Shift N to recalculate the normals outside. We have an option for inside, but if it's unchecked, then it will recalculate outside, which is what we want. Otherwise, you can go to the Mesh Normals menu and see all your options there. Okay, I can turn off face orientation now that we got that fixed. It's still going to look terrible until we unwrap it again, so we'll do that. And now all of our letters and numbers and symbols are no longer mirrored. Okay, so we can see that these relief cuts I did in the corner worked well, so let's go ahead and do that on the rest of the corners. Whoops. And remember, I'm selecting a bunch of edges in a row by selecting the first one, hold down Control, left click, select the last one. It will select the shortest path. I can mark the seams there. Okay. Come around this side. Mark that seam. That seam, and last two up here. Oh, also remember to turn on screencast keys. There we go. And then here and here. And mark that seam. Okay, so let's select everything. And again, I have live unwrap enabled, so I don't have to hit U and unwrap, but if you don't have live unwrap checked, then just unwrap it normally. See, that's all going to lay out flat. You can check our material preview. That's looking great. All right. So we do still need to see the corners here are a little bit distorted, so they just angle away a little bit. So here I'm just going to mark the seams right in the corners. See how that flattens it up immediately. Same thing over here. If you're ever having trouble getting your camera to orbit around the point that you want it to orbit around, just select an edge or a vertex or a face where you want the camera to rotate around, and that will help. And then you can also hit number pad period to focus on it, and that will help reorient your camera. I'll grab those two edges and I'll mark that seam. See, that flattens out again. Okay, you see this is at an angle. Grab these two edges and mark the seam. That straightens itself out. There we go. And then the last one down in this corner. Grab these two corner edges right there and mark that seam. Great. We got those all sorted. Select everything. It's all laying flat. That's great. That's great. We still have this island right here, and what that is it's this island right here. That's the last thing that we need to sort out. And for this, I'm just going to lay it out flat completely. I'm going to go in here to this bottom right corner, which we're probably never going to have a good camera angle at seeing. I'm just going to mark that one seam in the corner. And we can look at that, and that looks pretty good. This isn't unwrapping quite as straight as I would like it. So what I'm going to do is... let's see. I think I'm just going to grab this face, hit L to select the whole thing. But I still have, this is the active face, and the same thing that we did for the cables. We go to UV squares and 2 grid, no, sorry, not 2 grid by shape. We want, yeah, Alt E. UV is 2 grid with respect to shape. Alt E. I don't know why Alt E isn't working. Oh, it's because I'm not hitting Alt E, I was hitting Control E. And it is 2 grid by shape. We can just click on that. They both work. That doesn't seem to, seems to be stretched. Let's check our scale. Check our material preview. I'm going to select everything, and we're going to average the island scale. Yeah, you can see that that is in fact stretched. So let's select just this island, and I'm going to hit U to unwrap that. Its own. Let's try angle based. Nope. Go back to conformal. Okay, so we'll just grab one face to start. We'll grab this one. It's the closest to square, and we'll say to grid by shape, and then I'll hit L to select the whole thing. Let's try Alt E again. Okay. Yeah, it still wants to shrink that down. I have the scale applied. Okay, so what I'll do instead is just try breaking this up into a few different pieces. That might help. Grab that and I'll mark that seam as well. I select everything. Okay, and now it's straight. So we just add an extra seam. Again, in those corners, it's sharp enough and small enough that we're not going to notice that. Now, from this point, we can pack this island, but I want to pack the keypad in too. So let me go back into, or get out of local view, and let me grab our keypad here. I'll go into local view on this. And let's see, we need to unwrap this whole thing. So I know the rings around the buttons I probably want to be like a reflective metal, and I want the kind of main body area here to be something else. So we're going to want to separate those. And if you remember, wherever we have seams in materials or a differentiation in materials, that's a good place to mark a seam because we're already noticing a split anyway. So I'm going to go around to the base of all of these, and we'll mark those seams. Okay, now, of course, we've got 12 buttons, so we do have to do this 12 times. Let me try one thing real quick. This may or may not work. But if we hit Shift G, it'll bring up our select similar. And we can try... Let's try... Nope, that didn't work. Sometimes these options can save you some time. We can try face angles. Oh, that actually... That's not what I was hoping to select. I was hoping just to get the base, but we actually want seams in all of these places. So that'll work. Okay, so I'll right-click and mark that seam. Again, that's Shift G brings up your Select Similar menu. It's also in the Select and Select Similar right here. So we've got a few different options for things that Blender can look at to try to match. So that actually worked out just fantastic. So let's select everything and hit unwrap and just see what it does. No, I've got live unwrap on, so it did unwrap everything. We'll give it our test grid. Let's also check our face orientation here. Yep, you can see it's red, so let's Shift N, not M, Shift N, or recalculate the normals right there. We can turn off our face orientation. Okay, and let's look at our material preview and see what we've got going on. Oh, it looks like the interior buttons are still potentially reversed. Shift N again. Hmm. Oh, need to unwrap it again. There we go. Okay, that's good. So we can turn off our face orientation and go back into... Yeah, it's looking pretty good. Now we've got all of these rings around the outside. Those are... You see there's a fair amount of distortion. Now we may not apply an actual texture to it, but for the practice of it, even if we do just do a procedural texture, let's still fix that. So to fix that, what we need to do is we need to give it basically a relief cut on both the inside and the outside. So what I'm going to do is on the inside here, I'm just going to grab this edge. Now, this is the bottom inside edge. Okay. I'm going to solid view here. You see it's right down in there. It's probably the most hidden. And we can mark that seam. And then for the outside, you can see that this is a more visible edge, so I'll go to the top, and I will mark that seam right there. I'll select everything, and I'm going to turn off Live Unwrap. Also hit T to hide the toolbar in the UV editor, and N to hide that. Okay, and so now if we look at our islands, see here's the internal one, it's now laid completely flat, and this will be the external one, also laid completely flat. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that on the rest of these as well. One other note is that I've got, for some reason, and I don't know why this happened, but I've got 3 extra edges in here that I really don't need, because I've already got my holding edges. So I'm just going to dissolve those edges. You can see it doesn't affect the shape at all. Still looks great. And I just don't need them, so I'm going to get rid of those as well. So I'll do this on one more so you can see it again. And then I will pause the video and do it on the other 10 of them. Okay, so we'll get rid of the extra edge loops first, dissolve those edges, and then kind of swing around to this side. At the bottom, we're going to grab those 3 edges and mark that seam, and grab these 3 edges right here on the top side, on the outside, and mark that seam. Select it and unwrap. See, now we've got 2 more vertical islands here. And we'll keep going, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about the buttons here last. Okay, so I have marked all of those seams. Okay, you can see them, kind of see them if I rotate around the backside, you can see all the vertical seams there. So I selected everything and unwrapped it again, and got everything laid out straight. We have 12 rings still, and those are going to be these face loops here. And then we have 12 circles, and those are going to be the buttons. Now that's what I want to focus on now. So if I go into my material preview, we can see everything is unwrapped nicely and evenly, and generally I'm happy with that. However, for the buttons, we're going to want to put numbers on the buttons. And when we take this UV layout and we export this and we go into Photoshop and try to put our buttons on here, it gets tricky if we don't know what orientation our UV islands are. Okay, so if we come down to this button right here, okay, you can see it's this right here. It's this island. So let me give you like a real quick demonstration of why we need to pay attention here. So if I select this UV layout and we just go UV and export UV layout, I'll just go up into my textures folder here and say 1024 is fine. Say VM Keypad UV demo and export the UV layout. Then what I can do is I can open that up in Photoshop. So I'll go to my project files. This is off screen, but I'm going to open that file up in Photoshop. Okay, so now we're in Photoshop, and remember this was the UV island right here that we wanted to, let's say we want to add a number to it. So we can bring up our text tool and I can type in, let's say 3 because I like that number. And let's change the font here to something a little bit more interesting. go. Okay, and we'll change the color also to something more interesting. How about a bright yellow? That actually might not show up too well. This, however, will definitely show up. Okay, so we have that, and then... Okay. Gonna move it there, and Control-T to free transform. Let me position it right there. Okay, then what you do is you turn that off, and we'll just save this real quick. We'll save. And we'll save. Okay. I'll go over this a little bit more detail the next video probably, or the next couple of videos. But once we have that, I don't need to save those changes. Okay, we can go back in here. I'll give it a new material, and we'll give the base color an image texture, and I will load up my textures, and here it is. Open image. Okay, and then I'm going to select this island and assign the new material to it. You can see the 3 is there, and even though we actually look at our image here in the background, even though in Photoshop I made that 3 in the correct orientation, because the UVs are rotated, it's not in the correct orientation on the actual model. And so you can take that island and you can kind of try to manually set that to meeting point. You can kind of manually rotate that and try to get it close. But it's kind of a hassle, and there's an easier way to do that. But I wanted to illustrate why it's important to check the orientations on your objects, especially when you're applying custom textures and not just slapping a procedural texture or a tileable texture onto it. So I'll get rid of that material because we don't need that. And we can close that as well. All right, so now we need to unwrap these. And just randomly unwrapping them is always going to kind of give us random orientations. So here's what we can do. We want to project from view, because when we do that, it will, if we go to top view maybe, and I just select that and hit U in the UV editor, it will project that, or excuse me, I'll go to UV and, I guess I can't do it in that editor, I need to do it here. Project from view. Now when I do it, it's going to be in the correct orientation, but it's distorted. So what we need to do is we need to align our orientation, our view that we are projecting from. We need to align our view to the mesh so that we don't get that distortion. And you can try to do it free, just with free rotate. You're never going to get it exact. So one thing I did when I made this and when I constructed this keypad is, let me get out a local view here. I parented the keypad to the main kind of keyboard screen. And when I rotated the screen, I rotated it in object mode. So you can see this rotation is still on the object. So it's at 38.9. So I'm just going to write that down so I remember it. But what we can do is we can hit Alt-R, and that's going to clear the rotation. Now, we can go back to our keypad in local view, edit mode, hit 7 to go to top view. And now if I project from view, that's going to be in the correct orientation and not distorted. So now what we can do is we can hover over all of these buttons individually, okay, and hit U and project from view. And now we have all of our buttons. They are laid out nicely. And they're even in the correct, in relation to each other, so that we know that if we're going with the kind of a traditional keypad, then turn off sync selection here. we know that this would be the asterisk or the star key. This would be 0, pound, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Makes it really easy to texture this way. So that's why I left that rotation in object mode, so that I could clear that rotation. And then when we're done, we can add that rotation back. Oops, and we don't want to apply it to the keypad, we want to apply it to the whole thing. So, 38.9. Okay, and now that's back right where that was. Alternatively, what you can do is we can align the camera to that orientation. So you can select your object, and then we can go up to View, Align View to Active, and in this case we want the top. So we do that, and the view will go around to the top side of it, and then we can do the exact same thing that we did before. Okay, so we can just hover over each button. Again, I have delimit seam enabled, and select all 12, hit U and project from view, and we're going to get the same result that we did before. Okay, so nice and simple. You can also do that from edit mode. So we can just select some faces in edit mode. Just make sure you're selecting the flat faces. And then same thing, view, align view to active and top. Now in this case, it's going to rotate it 90 degrees. I'm not entirely sure why that happens, but you can either, from this point, just unwrap it normally and then rotate it. So if we unwrap project from view, then we just have to rotate it in the UV editor 90 degrees. Or you can rotate your viewport. And in this case, on the number pad, 4 and 6 will rotate. Yeah, but it gets a little bit tricky with certain angles, so it's probably best to just align to view, align view to active top. And you can see because I've got these faces selected and they're not perfectly flat, it doesn't exactly know how to rotate. So that's why we want to select these flat faces. And you don't have to select all these, you can even just select one. View, align, view to active top. Okay, so maybe we should select multiple faces. Help straighten it out. View, align, view to active top. Shift number pad 7 is the shortcut for that. That's one of those shortcuts that I don't really ever remember. And now we're having some slight orientation issues. Go into local view. And we'll grab these again. View. Okay, so it doesn't want to straight anymore. There we go. So if we select the straight faces, it seems to work a little bit better. So that's kind of 3 ways to do it. It might be easiest just to do it in object mode. The shift number pad 7. Oops, that's not shift. Shift number pad 7 would be the fastest way to do that. But once you have that, so now we have all of our pieces here. What we need to do is we need to pack the islands. And with all of these selected, I'm going to just hit G and move them off to the side. Let me actually, I'm going to unwrap this one more time just to make sure that they're in the right orientation. View and project from view. Okay. And I'll move these off to the side. Now, I'm going to get out of edit mode, get out of local view. I'm going to select both the keypad and the screen, and I'm going to join these together. So Control J. Now it's one object. And that works for me. I'm going to go back into edit mode, and then we can select everything. And now we can pack our islands. Now, before you go and hitting pack islands, I don't want to do this automatically because I want to keep these buttons in their correct orientation relation to each other. So we're going to do this manually. Oops, I want to maximize this view, and again, that's control space will maximize views. So I'm going to select everything, and I will average the island scale, because we want to make sure everything is the same relative size. But from here, we're going to do the packing of this manually. So what we want to do is we want to pack it in this grid, in this 0 to 1 UV space. And we're going to pack it towards the bottom left. You can see our 3D cursor here. We're going to pack everything as close as we can into the bottom left, and then we will scale it appropriately to fit in our scene. I am also going to leave the 3D view open so that I can see the correct orientation for things. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these objects, and I will hit period on the keyboard, not the number pad, just the keyboard, and set my pivot point to individual origins, and I will rotate this. Looks like we want to go negative 90 degrees. Let's check our rotations here. That all looks good. Looks like this frame, you can rotate that 100. Oh, no. Okay, that was right. This frame, rotate 180 degrees. There we go. Everything else is looking good. And then the back side here is also good. All right. So I think we're okay on rotation. Now we can start packing everything in. And so first, just to clean things up here so we can see what's going on, I'm just going to select the islands and individually move them around so I can see all the different parts that I have. And then we can select all of this junk. We'll just move it off to the side there. Okay. Now, let's grab this, and we will, again, we're going to bring this as close to the bottom left as we can. We're going to leave a little bit of space, but not much. Something like that works. And we can grab this, do the same. I want to leave, again, a little bit of a gap there. And then this. I'll do the same. Now you can see we are going outside the bounds of our UV space, but we'll fix that at the end. But now we have the rest of these pieces. For an object like this, we would have to do manual packing anyway, because if you remember, when it packs the islands, it won't consider this empty space in the middle here usable. It basically only packs on the outside of things. So if I select everything now and hit pack islands, you can see that it's not using any of that space. So I'm going to undo that. Now we can grab this object, and that can go right in there. This can go right in here. It's also helpful when you're packing islands to lay them out in a logical way that represents the object. So I am orienting the screen and the button or the keypad surround in the same relative position to each other that they would be in 3D space. Okay. Now we've got our buttons here. And for some reason, these are really split. So I'm going to unwrap those one more time. So with this orientation, we're going to hit Shift number pad 7, tab into edit mode, and select these again just with L. Hit U and project from view. Okay. And we'll select everything. Now you can see our relative scales are messed up. So what we can do is just select everything and average the island scale. They will adjust a little bit. It's more than I would like. So what we're going to do instead, I'll just select just these islands. I'm going to scale them, set our pivot point to the median point. I'm going to scale them down, and we have this as our reference. So I do that, and I'll scale those down until it's close. I'd go a little bit smaller. Then I'm moving back off to the side. Select everything, and then we can average island scale, and that will adjust any micro adjustments that we need. So once we've done that average island scale, I'm just going to check our borders and make sure there's still enough of a buffer between our UV islands, and there is. Okay. So now I can grab these again, and we'll pack those right in there. And the last thing we have are all of these pieces. See right here, this is going to fit really nicely right there. And then we have all of these vertical pieces we will just pack in here and here. And we've got a lot of extra space here, so we don't need to be too worried about maximizing space because, we're just not going to use all of it for what's available. That'll be good. I'll select these. I'll rotate these 90 degrees. I'm not worried about the orientation on these little bits either. Not a big deal. And I'll bring that over here. Then we have our little top rings. We'll bring these over. Pack these in here nicely as well. Put that one in there. I missed one. Let's grab that one. Okay, we got that. Okay, so everything is packed in there. Now I'm going to select everything. I'm going to set my pivot point to the 2D cursor. Remember, you can also set that up here, 2D cursor. And then I'm just going to scale it down until it fits into the seam. Just like that. And so anything that I'm manually packing will follow this same procedure. Is pack towards the bottom left. If you need to reset your 2D cursor, you can just go to your view and set your cursor location to 0, 0. Okay, so once we have that, we can look at our UVs here. And everything looks great. So that's it for UV unwrapping the keyboard on the vending machine. Next up, I think I'll probably do a quick video just going over all the rest of the scene that I unwrapped. There's nothing new for the rest of the scene. I'll turn it back on here so we can see it all. Rivets and the truss on, electrical panels. Turn the monkey heads on even though you're not going to see them. Cables. Okay, so that should be everything. Actually, I'll just jump over to this scene because I have everything already unwrapped. Oh, I also have textures applied to everything, so maybe this isn't the best scene. But I'll go over everything, how I unwrapped it. See, this is actually a little bit of a preview of where we're heading. It's also going to take a minute because I've got a lot of 4K textures in here that my system is both screen recording and trying to process all this, so it takes a second. So let me instead open up the UVs scene. Save that. Go to our UVs, and we can see all of our UVs that are unwrapped. Oh, of course I applied everything. Okay, so here's all of our UVs. There's nothing, no new techniques. I think that covers everything. We've got a video on the cables and the pipes. This keyboard being the last thing. But I'll kind of do a once-over just so you can see how the UVs are laid out for everything. And if there's anything tricky that comes up, but I don't really think there is. These are all pretty straightforward. This is maybe a little bit more complicated, but again, this is just a box and I separated out the top, so I'll most likely do a short video on that. And then we'll move on to actually applying materials and textures and getting some light going and really starting to make this look cyberpunk. Because at this point, it looks more like an alley. I guess the vending machines is a bit cyberpunk, but once we get some lights and some glowing things, it's really gonna start feeling futury. So that's coming up next.